Let's start with the height of Goliath. This is one of the details that we all hear of. This great, monstrous man, 9 foot something, almost 10 feet tall. This is the detail everyone focuses on. How big he was. If you open up 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 14, let's do it, folks. 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 14, you will see, verse 4, it says here, I'm reading from the WEB translation of the Masoretic Hebrew text. It's the same foundation that you read of when you got the King James, New King James, NIV, or NIV, and NASB, and all these other new English Bible translations, including the old one of the Old King James. It will tell you, check it out yourself, it will tell you that Goliath was a champion out of the camp of the Philistines whose height was 6 cubits and a span. 6 cubits and a span. Most modern English Bibles tell you this. This is a translation of what we call the Masoretic Hebrew text. It's not as old as most people believe. The Masoretic Hebrew text was finalized only about 1,000 years ago. It didn't date back to even Jesus' day or the New Testament. It didn't date back to David and Goliath. But we have an older text, the Septuagint. So this tells us how high Goliath was. 6 cubits and a span. The Masoretic text says there came out from the camp the Philistines, and he was 6 cubits and a span. Let's do the math on that. A cubit is roughly 18 inches. So a span is about 9 inches, and it's literally a hand span. What would you call an average man's hand span? Okay, about 9 inches. 6 cubits and a span makes Goliath 9 feet 9 inches tall, almost 10 feet. A literal giant. But let's look at another manuscript. We have the Septuagint. We have the Septuagint, the text the early church used. Many early church fathers have used the Septuagint. Some have used a text that looks a little bit more like the Hebrew, but it matches the Septuagint in many ways. The Septuagint says something different. Let's have a look at it. Let's go to the Septuagint here, the older, much older Greek translation of the Hebrew text. And it says here in 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 4, there went forth a mighty man out of the army of the Philistines, Goliath by name, out of Gath. His height was 4 cubits and a span. 4 cubits and a span. This is the older text. This text predates the so-called original Hebrew by about 1,000 years. Perhaps even a little bit more than that. So most English Bibles will tell you that Goliath was 6 cubits and a span, which means he was 9 feet 9 inches tall. But the older manuscript says 4 cubits. 4 cubits and a span is only about 6 feet 9 inches. 6 feet 9 inches. Well, I think there are some people even alive today that are 6 feet 9 inches, so it's not that hard to believe. It's not like an impossibility. 9 feet 9 inches, well, that's another story, right? It's a lot more believable. It's a lot more palatable, if you will, to go by the older manuscript that Goliath was 6 feet 9 inches, not 9 feet 9 inches. I got a graphic here for you guys. Okay, I'm going to have to scroll this back and forth for those who are watching this on a vertical device. This is from 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 4, Goliath, the height of Goliath comparison. So the Masoretic text here says that he was 6 cubits in a span, which makes him 9 feet 9 inches tall. Mythological giant. But the Septuagint tells us that he was 4 cubits in a span, 6 feet 9 inches tall. This is more like it, right? I mean, look at the differences here we got. This is more like, it's a lot more plausible to have that kind of height on a very tall man, of course. So, yeah, Goliath was still very tall, but not as tall as what we read in the Masoretic Hebrew. 6 feet 9 inches is a massive, terrifying warrior in the ancient world, where the average Israelite, the average man of the children of Israel, was only about 5 foot 4 inches, say. So he's still a giant compared to them, but he is a human warrior. 9 feet 9 inches pushes the text out of historical reality into the realm of mythology and fairy tales. Who is right? Did the Greek translators shrink Goliath? Or did the later medieval rabbis exaggerate him to make the story more epic? To make it hit harder? To make David look bigger and stronger? Or to make their story a lot stronger? Once again, I don't think we really have to guess. We just have to look at the dirt. Archaeologists found an ancient Hebrew copy of the scroll of the book of Samuel in the Dead Sea Scrolls, in the caves of Qumran, predating the birth of Christ. The scroll itself is literally called 4Q Sam A. 4Q SAMA. This is an ancient Hebrew text, untouched by the medieval Masoretes. You know, those same scribes that have transmitted the text to you. They unrolled this fragile scroll and went to 1 Samuel chapter 17, and they read the height of Goliath. Guess what it says? Guess what it says? Do you think the Dead Sea Scrolls matches the so-called original Hebrew, the modern Masoretic text that we have today? Or do you think that it matches the Greek Septuagint? I'll give you a little bit of a hint. It starts with G, or I should say it starts with S. Yeah, it matches the Septuagint. The Dead Sea Scrolls confirm the Septuagint to be the accurate number. Goliath was 6'9". Only 4 cubits in a span, not 6 cubits in a span. The ancient Hebrew matched the Greek text. The medieval scribes who gave us the Masoretic text literally expanded, or I don't. We should say that it's looking like the scribes somewheres between the time of Christ to the time when the Masoretic text has been finalized. That's about the 10th century AD. Somewheres in there, after the New Testament period, they have expanded the height of Goliath by 3 feet. They altered the historical record to turn, or let me ask you guys, do you think they altered the historical record to turn a historical military encounter into something a lot bigger than it was? Changing his height is nothing compared to what they did with the rest of the chapter. Oh, but there's more, folks. There's more. So the rest of the chapter, we have contradictions between the texts. David's contradiction timeline. Here we have our screen. I'm going to scroll it back and forth again for the sake of those who were on vertical devices such as cell phones and such. David's contradiction timeline, 1 Samuel chapter 16. We have David the insider. King Saul, loving armor bearer to Saul. David is the loving armor bearer to Saul. He lives in the king's tent. He has a personal relationship with the king. In chapter 17, we have the Goliath event. Okay? And then we have the spliced editions, 40 verses. The Masoretic text includes many, many different verses between these texts. Seamless story in the Septuagint, but not so seamless in the Masoretic text. The big contradiction is that David goes from an intimate insider in chapter 16 to a complete stranger. Chapter 17. Hubert says shalom. Shalom, Huberts. Welcome and blessings multiplied to you and your family. So if you read the David and Goliath story in your modern Bible, there is a massive glaring contradiction. In chapter 16, King Saul is tormented by an evil spirit. He asks his servants to find someone to play the lyre to soothe him. The lyre being a musical instrument, a stringed musical instrument, a little bit similar to a guitar, if you will. They bring him David. The text specifically says that Saul loved David greatly, and David became Saul's personal armor bearer. They knew each other intimately. David lives in the king's tent, but you turn the page to chapter 17, the story goes, there's the story of Goliath. David goes out, kills the giant, and comes back carrying his head. And what does King Saul say in verse 55? Saul turns to his general, Abner, and says, Abner, who is this? Whose son is this youth? And Abner says, I don't know. So Saul says, inquire whose son the boy is. Stop and think about this. How absurd is that? David is his personal armor bearer. In one manuscript, we have David as his personal armor bearer. David is like his personal musician. David plays music for him every time he is tormented. And yet, one chapter later, King Saul has absolutely no idea who David is. And his top general doesn't know either. See, so some critics of the Bible have used this exact contradiction for centuries to claim that the scriptures are just sloppy, thrown together myths. But the early church didn't have this contradiction. The apostles didn't have this contradiction. In the first century, they did not have this contradiction. You know why? Because verses 55 through 58 do not exist in the Septuagint. In fact, almost 40 verses, they say, of 1 Samuel chapter 17 are completely missing from the ancient Greek text. The Septuagint tells a seamless, streamlined story. David is already in the camp. He goes out, kills the Philistine, and there is no confusing amnesia from King Saul. So where did those extra 40 verses come from? Did the Masoretic scribes, did the Jewish scribes, did they just copy the original text? It seems like they took the original story and they spliced it together with a completely different secondary tradition where David was an unknown shepherd boy who just happened to be delivering cheese to his brothers. They mashed two different stories together, creating a massive